In 1914, the richest family in the world, the Rockefellers, hired a private army and ordered them to open fire on a tent colony of over 1,000 striking American coal miners. This is what's known as the Ludlow Massacre, and the reason I'm talking about it is because the early 1900s is the last time we saw a wealth gap in America comparable to the one we have now. At the time of the massacre, the strikers had already been protesting for over a year. They had been evicted from their homes in the dead of the Colorado winter, and many of them had already been killed in clashes with the strikebreakers. John Rockefeller Jr., who was the heir to his father's fortune and at that point fully in charge of the empire, had hired a detective agency who had been shooting into the encampment for months. The violence had become so frequent that the strikers actually dug pits underneath their tents to shelter the women and children from gunfire. Things came to a head on the morning of April 20th when two companies of the Colorado National Guard, whose salaries were being paid by the Rockefellers, used machine guns to lay siege to the Ludlow tent encampment. The miners were armed as well. They fired back, and the fighting continued to escalate throughout the day. Eventually, the leader of the miners, a Greek immigrant named Louis Tikas, came down from the hills under a white flag of truce to try and negotiate a ceasefire. When he arrived, the leader of the National Guard company, Lieutenant Linderfeld, broke a Springfield rifle over his head and then shot him 3 times in the back. Linderfeld was court-martialed for this murder, but later fully acquitted. The conflict ended when the strikebreakers set fire to the camp, leading directly to the deaths of 2 women and 11 children, who all suffocated in the pits dug underneath the tents. The news of this massacre spread rapidly throughout Colorado, and the workers responded by basically declaring a class war. The United Mine Workers of America issued a call to arms, picked up guns, and took cover in the hills, exploding mines and attacking guards as they went. The Colorado Cigar Makers Union voted to send 500 armed men to assist the strikers in Ludlow. Rail workers refused to transport soldiers who were being sent to put the strike down. In fact, 82 of the soldiers themselves refused to be deployed, saying that they would not go to shoot women and children. In New York, large crowds of people wearing black armbands silently surrounded the Rockefeller building, forcing the family to flee upstate. So what happened? Well, I'd love to tell you that the Rockefellers caved and the miners had their demands met, but that's not the way it went. Predictably, the national media sided with the business interests and painted the strikers in a negative light. The New York Times called them savage-minded men, emphasizing the threat that they posed to the rule of law. Eventually, President Woodrow Wilson sent in federal troops to defuse the strike and restore order. The strikers won a couple of protections, but it would take decades and many more conflicts like this one before their full agenda was enacted. Many of the miners at Ludlow and thousands of other common people throughout American history were willing to give their lives so that we could enjoy basic economic freedoms like the 8-hour workday or weekends. Right now, we're seeing a consolidation of wealth similar to the one that happened in the early 20th century. It is our responsibility to honor the memory of the men, women, and children who died fighting for these liberties by continuing the tradition of civil disobedience that they started.